Have you ever driven through a town where every passenger seemed to know something you didn't? Have you ever noticed that all your rides end in isolated places and nobody will tell you why? What would you do if you tried to leave a town and your GPS kept redirecting you back, as if the roads themselves refused to let you go? And when does a series of strange ride requests become evidence that you've stumbled into a place where the living and the dead share the same streets? And some passengers should never be picked up at all? My name is Chris Hendricks, and I've been driving for Uber for 4 years across Virginia and neighboring states. 4 years of highway miles, small-town pickups, and the freedom of being able to work anywhere there's cell service and people who need rides. I'm what they call a road warrior. I don't stay in one place long, just drift from city to city, working enough to pay for gas and cheap motels, moving on when I get bored. It's a lonely life, but it's mine, or it was, until I spent 5 days trapped in Grayson Falls, Virginia, a town of maybe 800 people tucked into the Blue Ridge Mountains, where every ride I gave was to somewhere isolated, every passenger knew more than they were telling, and the roads refused to let me leave no matter how many times I tried to escape. I arrived in Grayson Falls on a Tuesday in late October, just as the sun was setting behind the mountains. I'd been driving south from Charlottesville, planning to make it to Roanoke by midnight when my car started making a concerning noise, a grinding sound from the transmission that suggested expensive repairs in my immediate future. I pulled off Route 220 at the Grayson Falls exit, hoping to find a mechanic, or at least a place to sleep while I figured out my options. The town appeared suddenly as I came around a mountain curve. It sat in a narrow valley between ridges, a collection of old buildings clustered around a main street that probably hadn't changed much since the 1950s. There was a gas station, a diner, a few storefronts that looked either closed or abandoned, and a small motel with a flickering vacancy sign. The whole place had that dying small-town quality, the kind of community young people flee from as soon as they're old enough to drive, leaving behind only the old and the stubborn. I pulled into the gas station, which also advertised mechanic services. An older man in greasy coveralls emerged from the garage bay, wiping his hands on a rag. His name tag said Earl. "Help you?" he asked, his accent thick with Mountain Virginia. "My transmission's making a bad sound. Think you could take a look?" Earl walked around my car, listened to the engine, then shook his head. "Gonna need a part I don't have in stock. Can order it but won't get here till Friday at the earliest. This is Tuesday, so you're looking at 3, maybe 4 days. My heart sank. I can't wait that long. I need to get to Roanoke tonight. "Well, you can try driving it, but based on that sound, I'd say you got maybe 20 miles before she gives out completely. Then you'll be stranded on the highway instead of here where there's at least a motel and food. Your choice." I looked around at Grayson Falls, population 834 according to the welcome sign, elevation 2,100 feet, founded 1842. The mountains rose steeply on either side of the valley, and the October twilight was making everything look gray and unwelcoming. But Earl was right. Better to be stuck here than broken down on a mountain highway. "Fine. Order the part. I'll get a room at the motel." Smart choice. Motel's clean enough. Diner serves decent food. And if you need to make some money while you wait, folks around here use that Uber app sometimes. Might get a few calls. I hadn't considered that, but it made sense. If I was going to be stuck here for days, I might as well work. People actually use Uber out here. Seems like the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Earl's expression shifted, became guarded. "We get by. Folks need rides sometimes, especially at night, you'll see." Something about the way he said it made me uncomfortable, but I was too frustrated about my car situation to press further. I checked into the Magnolia Motel, 12 rooms, half of them occupied according to the elderly woman at the desk, and opened my Uber app. To my surprise, I got a ping within 10 minutes. Pickup request from Sarah M., 4.9 stars. Location showed an address on Maple Street, about 6 blocks from the motel. No destination entered yet. I accepted, thinking it would be a quick ride to earn a few dollars for dinner. I pulled up to a small craftsman-style house, porch light on, well-maintained despite its obvious age. A woman in her 40s emerged, wearing jeans and a sweater, carrying a small backpack. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and moved with purpose. "Chris?" she asked as she opened the back door. "That's me. Where are we headed?" She pulled out her phone and entered an address. When it came up on my screen, I frowned. "Old Mill Road? That's 6 miles outside town, up in the mountains. I know where it is, that's where I need to go." "What's out there?" "My business." Her tone was firm but not rude. "You'll get a good fare out of it and I'll tip. Just drive, please." We pulled away from her house and headed north on the main road out of town. Within a mile we were climbing into the mountains, the road becoming narrow and winding. Full darkness had fallen now, and my headlights barely penetrated the dense forest on either side. "You from Grayson Falls?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Born and raised, never left. Must be a tight-knit community." "In some ways." She was looking out the window, watching the darkness pass. "In other ways, we're all strangers to each other. Keeping secrets, doing things we don't talk about." "That sounds ominous." She met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Does it? I suppose it does. But every small town has secrets, doesn't it? Things the locals know but don't share with outsiders. Families that have lived here for generations, following traditions nobody else understands." "What kind of traditions?" "The kind that keep a place alive when it should have died decades ago. Grayson Falls should be a ghost town by now. The coal mines closed in the 70s. The timber industry died in the 80s. There's no real economy keeping people here. But we endure. We persist. Because of certain arrangements." The way she said arrangements made my skin prickle. "I don't understand." "You will, if you stay long enough. Most people pass through Grayson Falls without noticing anything unusual. But some people, like you, stuck here for a few days. They start to see things, start to understand that this town operates by different rules than the outside world." We'd climbed high into the mountains now, the road becoming barely more than a dirt track. My GPS showed we were approaching the destination, though I couldn't see any buildings or lights. "Stop here," Sarah said suddenly. I pulled over at what looked like a trailhead, a small clearing where the forest opened up slightly. Sarah got out, shouldering her backpack. In my headlights, I could see a narrow path leading into the trees. "What's out there?" I asked. "A place where certain things happen, where certain needs are met. You don't need to know more than that." She pulled cash from her wallet, $40 for a $15 fare. "Keep the change. And Chris, a word of advice. If you get ride requests late at night, pay attention to where people want to go. Some places in these mountains, you're better off not visiting, and some passengers you're better off not driving." "How do I know which is which?" "You'll figure it out. Or you won't, and you'll learn the hard way." She turned and walked into the forest, her figure disappearing almost immediately into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, my headlights illuminating the empty path, then turned around and drove back down the mountain. The next ride request came at 11 p.m., just as I was about to call it a night. Thomas R., 5 stars, pickup from Oak Street. I almost declined. I was tired and Sarah's cryptic warnings had left me unsettled, but I needed the money. I accepted. Thomas was an elderly man, maybe 75, using a cane to walk to my car. He wore old-fashioned clothing, slacks, a button-down shirt, a cardigan despite the mild night. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone conscious of their fragility. "Evening," he said as he settled into the back seat. "Thank you for driving this late." "No problem. Where to?" He entered an address that made me pause. "Riverside Cemetery, about 3 miles east of town. You need a ride to the cemetery? At 11 p.m.? I visit my wife's grave every night. Have for 30 years since she passed. It's the only time I feel close to her anymore." It was sad but not entirely unusual. I'd driven people to cemeteries before, usually during the day but occasionally at odd hours. "All right, I'll take you there." The drive was quiet. Thomas stared out the window, occasionally sighing softly. We passed through town, completely dark now except for a few streetlights, and headed east on a 2-lane road. The cemetery appeared on the left, a small graveyard surrounded by an iron fence, maybe 100 headstones visible in the moonlight. I pulled up to the entrance. "You need me to wait for you?" "No, thank you. I'll walk home. It's not far and the night air does me good." He paid, tipped modestly, and got out. I watched him walk through the cemetery gates, moving between headstones with obvious familiarity, heading toward the back where older graves stood. Then I drove back to town. The third ride request came at 1:30 a.m. I'd been lying in my motel room, unable to sleep, scrolling through my phone. The ping made me jump. Michael K., no rating. Pickup from Main Street. I almost ignored it. 1:30 in the morning seemed late, even by small-town standards, but the address was right in town, and I was wide awake anyway. The pickup location was in front of the closed diner. A man in his 30s stood under the streetlight, hands in his jacket pockets, dark hair disheveled. When I pulled up, he got in quickly like he'd been waiting anxiously. "Thanks for coming. Didn't think anyone would be working this late. Just started driving here today. Where are you headed?" He entered an address that showed as Cooper's Hollow Road, about 8 miles into the mountains west of town. Another isolated location. Another late-night destination with no obvious purpose. "What's out in Cooper's Hollow?" I asked as we drove. "A cabin, belongs to my family. I go there sometimes when I need to think, when I need to be away from town. Must be peaceful." It is. But it's also active. Things happen there that don't happen other places. Doors open on their own. You hear voices when nobody's there. Objects move. My grandfather built that cabin in 1923, and he died there in 1960. I think part of him never left. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You believe in ghosts? In Grayson Falls? You'd be crazy not to. This whole valley is full of them. The living and the dead exist right on top of each other here. Sometimes you can't tell which is which." That's what Sarah said earlier. She mentioned traditions, arrangements, like the town has some kind of deal with something. Michael went very still. "You drove Sarah tonight? Where did she go?" "Up Old Mill Road, some trailhead in the mountains." "Jesus, she's doing it again. I told her to stop, told her it wasn't worth it, but she won't listen." He leaned forward. "Chris, listen to me carefully. If Sarah requests another ride, don't take her. Don't take her anywhere. She's getting involved with things that are dangerous, things that could spread to anyone who helps her." "What kind of things?" "The kind that used to require human sacrifice before the town made its arrangements. The kind that still hunger for blood even though they've agreed to take other offerings. Sarah thinks she can control it, thinks she can use it for her own purposes. But you can't control what lives in these mountains. You can only appease it." We'd climbed high into the western mountains now, the road even rougher than the one to Sarah's destination. Cooper's Hollow was a small valley tucked between ridges, and the cabin sat at the end of a rutted dirt road, a small log structure, dark and isolated, surrounded by thick forest. Michael got out, paid me, then leaned back in through the window. "One more thing. If you get a ride request from someone named Margaret Shaw, don't accept it. Don't pick her up no matter what. She died in 1987, but her profile is still active somehow. Every few months, someone new to town accepts her request and they regret it. Just trust me on this." He walked toward the dark cabin and I started to turn around. But before I could complete the turn, my headlight swept across the cabin's window, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. A face looking out from inside, an old woman's face, pale and sunken, watching Michael approach. But Michael had said his grandfather built the cabin. The face I'd seen was female. I didn't wait to see more. I drove back down the mountain faster than was safe, my mind racing. What was happening in this town? Why did every ride end somewhere isolated? Why did every passenger hint at dark secrets and dangerous arrangements? Back at the motel, I tried to sleep but couldn't. Around 3:30 a.m., my phone pinged with another request. Margaret S., pickup from Church Street, 5-star rating. My thumb hovered over decline. Michael's warning echoing in my mind. But curiosity, and a journalist's instinct I'd developed from too many late-night conversations with strange passengers, made me accept. The pickup location was in front of an old white church at the edge of town. A woman stood in the shadows near the building. I couldn't see her clearly, but her posture suggested elderly, frail. As I pulled up, she stepped into my headlights, and I felt my stomach drop. She looked wrong. That's the only way I can describe it. She wore clothing from the 80s, a floral dress, a cardigan, orthopedic shoes. But they looked faded, like old photographs. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken, and she moved with a strange floating quality, like her feet weren't quite touching the ground. She got in the back seat and I felt the temperature drop 20 degrees. When she spoke, her voice had an echo to it, like it was coming from far away. "Thank you for stopping. Nobody stops anymore. They all know what I am." "Are you Margaret Shaw?" A long pause. "You know my name. Then you know what happened to me." "I don't. But someone warned me not to pick you up." "Did they tell you I died? That I've been dead for 38 years? That I was the last sacrifice before the town made its arrangements?" My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What arrangements?" In 1987, Grayson Falls was dying. The young people had left, businesses were closing, the future looked bleak. So the old families, the ones who'd lived here since the town was founded, they made a deal with what lives in these mountains. They'd provide offerings, perform certain rituals, keep certain traditions, and in exchange, the town would endure. The entity would protect Grayson Falls, keep it alive, give it purpose. What entity? It has many names. The old families call it the Guardian. Others call it the Hollow One, or the Voice in the Mountains. It's old, older than the town, older than the European settlement of this valley. The Cherokee knew about it before they were driven out. They avoided this valley, said it was cursed, that something dwelled here that hungered for human consciousness. And the town made a deal with this thing? They tried, but deals require sacrifice. So they chose me. 73 years old, no family left, wouldn't be missed. They took me into the mountains to the same place you dropped Sarah tonight, and they performed a ritual. Cut my throat, let my blood soak into the earth, offered my consciousness to the entity as payment for its protection. I felt bile rise in my throat. That's murder. It was, but it was also the price. Except it didn't work. The entity rejected me. Said I was too old, too close to death already. It wanted vitality, youth, fear. My death meant nothing to it. So I'm stuck. Not alive, not properly dead, just anchored to this town. And every few weeks I try to find someone who'll take me away from here. But the town won't let me leave. The entity won't let me leave. I'm trapped here forever. A reminder of their failed sacrifice. Where do you want to go? Anywhere outside the valley, just drive. Take me past the town limits and let me see if I can finally cross over. Against all reason, I drove. We went south on Route 220, the road I'd originally come in on. Margaret sat in the back seat, growing more agitated as we approached the edge of town. When we reached the welcome sign, the boundary that marked where Grayson Falls officially ended, something strange happened. My GPS glitched. The screen flickered, then rerouted itself, showing a U-turn. My car's steering wheel jerked to the right on its own, pulling us onto a side road I hadn't noticed before. I tried to correct, but the wheel wouldn't respond to my input. "It's happening," Margaret whispered. "It won't let us leave." We were on a narrow mountain road now, climbing rapidly. My GPS showed we were heading northeast, back toward town, but the roads on the screen didn't match reality. We were driving through spaces that shouldn't exist, on roads that bent in impossible ways. "You need to stop the car," Margaret said. "Stop now before it takes you somewhere you can't return from." I slammed on the brakes. The car shuddered to a halt on what looked like an old logging road. When I looked at my GPS, it showed we were back in Grayson Falls, parked on Main Street, except we weren't. We were in the mountains, surrounded by dark forest, nowhere near town. "The entity is warning you," Margaret said. "It's showing you that you can't leave. Not yet. Not until you understand what this town is. You're like me now, trapped here until you serve a purpose. What purpose? I don't know. But nothing happens in Grayson Falls by accident. You didn't end up here randomly. The entity brought you here for a reason. And until that reason is fulfilled, the roads will keep bringing you back no matter how many times you try to leave." She faded then, becoming transparent, her form dissolving like smoke. Within seconds, she was gone completely, and the back seat was empty. The temperature returned to normal. My GPS reset showing the correct location, about 4 miles northwest of town on an unmapped forest road. I drove back to the motel slowly, my mind reeling. When I arrived, dawn was breaking over the mountains, and I'd been driving for over 4 hours, though it felt like minutes. I stumbled to my room and collapsed on the bed. The next day, Wednesday, I tried to leave. Told Earl I'd risk the transmission failure, just needed to get out of this town. But every road I took led me back. South on Route 220, I'd end up on the north side of town. East toward the interstate, I'd find myself on a mountain road heading west. It was impossible, maddening, and absolutely real. The town wouldn't let me go. That night, I got 7 ride requests. Each passenger took me somewhere isolated: abandoned cabins, forest clearings, cemetery gates. Each one told me fragments of the story. Sarah had been trying to bargain with the entity for her sick daughter's life. Thomas visited his wife's grave because she was one of the successful sacrifices from the 1960s. Michael's family had been part of the original deal, and he was trying to figure out how to break it. And every passenger mentioned disappearances. People who came to Grayson Falls and never left. Travelers whose cars broke down, who stayed a few days and then vanished. The entity collected them, they said, took them into the mountains and absorbed their consciousness into the collective that sustained it. On Thursday night, I got a request from Sarah again. Against my better judgment, I accepted. She directed me to a different location this time, a cave system on the eastern ridge. When we arrived, she turned to me before getting out. "You've figured it out by now, haven't you? What this town is. What keeps it alive. Some kind of entity, taking consciousness, feeding on fear and vitality. Close. It's not just taking, it's preserving. Every person who's died in this valley for the past 2 centuries, their consciousness gets absorbed into the entity. They become part of it, part of what sustains Grayson Falls. My daughter is sick, dying. Modern medicine can't help her. But if I offer myself to the entity, it might take me instead. Might let her live. That's insane. You can't negotiate with something like that. Can't I? Margaret's sacrifice failed because she was old and willing. But I'm young, terrified, fighting it. That makes me valuable. The entity feeds on struggle. On the moment when consciousness realizes it's about to end. That terror, that desperate clinging to life, that's what it wants. And I'm willing to give it in exchange for my daughter's future. She got out and walked toward the cave. I called after her, but she didn't turn back. I sat there for 10 minutes, then drove back to town. The next morning, I learned that Sarah had been found unconscious near the cave system, hospitalized in a coma. Her daughter, meanwhile, made a miraculous recovery. Her terminal cancer, suddenly in complete remission. Friday came. Earl called to say my car part had arrived and he'd have it installed by evening. I should be able to leave by midnight. I waited at the motel, refusing all ride requests, just wanting to get out of Grayson Falls. But at 10 p.m., one final request came through. The name made my blood run cold. Chris H. My own name. Someone had created an Uber profile with my name and was requesting a ride. The pickup location showed my motel room number. The destination was Old Mill Road, the same trailhead where I'd dropped Sarah days ago. I declined the request. It came through again. I declined again. It kept coming over and over until finally I turned off my phone. But at 11 p.m., there was a knock on my motel room door. I opened it to find a man who looked exactly like me. Same face, same build, same clothes. But his eyes were wrong. Too dark, too empty, like looking into a well. "The entity has a message," he said in my voice. "Your car is fixed. You're free to leave Grayson Falls. But you'll carry a piece of this place with you. Every town you drive through, every passenger you pick up, you'll wonder if they're alive or dead, if they're trying to leave or trying to trap you. You'll never be certain again what's real. That's the price for witnessing what you've witnessed." Why me? Why did it want me here? To serve as a warning, to spread the story. The entity wants people to know about Grayson Falls, wants travelers to avoid this valley, to feel that instinctive dread when they see the exit sign. Fear feeds it as much as consciousness does, and you'll carry that fear everywhere you go. He walked away, disappearing around the corner of the motel. When I went to look, there was no one there. I packed my bags, went to Earl's garage, picked up my car. The transmission ran perfectly. I got on Route 220 heading south, and this time, the GPS let me go. The road led out of the valley without redirecting me. But as I crested the ridge and looked back at Grayson Falls in my rearview mirror, I saw something that still haunts me. The entire town was glowing faintly, like foxfire or swamp gas, and above it, in the dark mountain sky, something vast and formless moved. The entity, showing itself just for a moment to the one person it had allowed to leave. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been driving ever since, taking rides in different towns, trying to go back to normal. But nothing feels normal anymore. Every late-night passenger makes me wonder if they're alive. Every isolated destination makes me check if the GPS will let me leave afterward. Every small town in the mountains makes me think of Grayson Falls and what might be living in the valleys around them. And sometimes, late at night, I get ride requests from impossible passengers. Margaret Shaw requesting rides from towns hundreds of miles away. Thomas asking to go to cemeteries in cities he never lived in. Sarah wanting to go to hospitals where her daughter isn't being treated. They're following me, or the entity is reaching through them, reminding me that I witnessed something I wasn't supposed to survive. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. Don't know if I'll ever trust that the roads will let me leave a place I've entered. The entity marked me that week in Grayson Falls, made me a carrier of its story, and now I'm cursed to see the thin places between life and death in every town I pass through. If you're reading this, if you've ever driven through small mountain towns and felt that inexplicable dread, that sense that something is watching from the forests, trust that feeling. Some places survive against all logic because they've made arrangements we don't understand. Some towns are kept alive by entities that feed on consciousness and fear. And some passengers shouldn't be picked up no matter how much they need a ride. I learned that lesson in Grayson Falls, Virginia. Population 834, elevation 2,100 feet, founded 1842, sustained by something older and darker than any of us can comprehend. And if you ever see that exit sign on Route 220, if you ever consider stopping there because your car breaks down or you need a place to sleep, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't stay. Because the town might not let you leave, and by the time you understand what you've stumbled into, it'll be too late to escape. The roads will keep bringing you back. The passengers will keep teaching you the truth. And eventually you'll become part of what sustains that cursed valley. Another consciousness absorbed into the entity. Another voice warning travelers to stay away. Another ghost requesting rides to nowhere at 3 a.m. That's the real horror of Grayson Falls. Not that people die there, but that they never really leave. They become part of the town's collective consciousness, trapped in the valley forever, serving the entity that keeps that dying community alive against all natural law. And now I carry that knowledge everywhere I go, wondering which town will be next, which passengers are already dead, and whether the roads will let me leave when I try. If this story resonated with you, if you've driven through towns that felt wrong or picked up passengers who knew too much about places they shouldn't, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment sharing your experiences with places that don't let you leave, with GPS that redirects you against your will, with the growing certainty that not everyone requesting a ride is actually among the living. Maybe you've been trapped by a town that made dark arrangements. Maybe you've carried passengers who were already dead. Maybe you've felt that supernatural dread when you realize the roads won't take you where you want to go. You're not alone. We're all navigating a world where some places exist outside normal rules, where entities older than civilization still hunger for consciousness and fear, where a simple breakdown can trap you in a valley that feeds on the travelers who never make it out. Thanks for listening to my story about Grayson Falls. Thanks for believing that some towns survive through means we don't want to understand. And if your car ever breaks down in a small mountain town where everyone seems to have secrets and every ride ends somewhere isolated, don't stay. Fix your car and leave immediately. Because some places will trap you if you give them the chance, and by the time you realize what's happening, the roads will already be bringing you back no matter how desperately you try to escape.